Happy Easter. I'm going to tell you a short little story. Test the limits of your concentration. Some of you. So this is a story about Easter. And this is a little bit of a sad story, but it's also a very beautiful and very special story because it's about all of us. And that's why we celebrate Easter. Now, this is the story of what happened right after Jesus died. And the time when Jesus died, well, about Jesus. Now, all of you know that Jesus was a great master and that he had great, great love for everyone. But above all, more than anything, he had great, great love for God. And he had great trust in God. And being a master, he was one with God. And so at the time of his death, Jesus was not afraid. When it was time to die, he was brave and he was calm. And after he died, some soldiers took Jesus and they wrapped his body up in long strips of cloth and they put him in a cave called a tomb. And they put a big, heavy rock over the entrance to the cave so nobody could get in there. And Jesus was dead. And they left some soldiers there outside the cave to guard it so that nobody could come there. Why? Yeah. The why is because even though so many people loved Jesus, some people did not. They didn't understand. But the next part of the story is very special. 2 days passed. And it was a Sunday, just like today, very early in the morning, like when Jay gets up. The sun was just barely coming up. And there, the earth began to tremble. And then it began to shake like an earthquake.
What was shaking?
A beautiful light came down from heaven. And there was an angel there. And the soldiers were there at the cave. They fell to the ground. And the big, heavy stone that was guarding the cave moved aside. And at that moment, one of Jesus' good friends, Mary Magdalene, had come to visit the place where they buried Jesus. And she came there, and she saw what had happened. The stone was moved, the soldiers were on the ground, and Jesus was gone. She couldn't believe it. And she was sad, and so she ran away from there. And as she ran, she came to 2 more of Jesus' friends, Simon Peter, and another friend that Jesus loved very much and who loved Jesus. And she told them what happened. And so they ran to the cave to see for themselves. And they saw the stone was moved. They saw that the soldiers were on the ground. And they saw the long strips of cloth that had wrapped up Jesus were folded up there in the cave. Now they believed that Jesus had died, but that God had brought him back to life. And so they ran too, but they ran to tell the others, Jesus' friends, because they believed that Jesus was alive. But Mary did not believe. She stayed there near the cave, and she was crying. She was sad, and she was sitting there crying, and the sun was coming up, and it was bright there. And as she was crying, a man came to her. And he said to her, "Mary, why are you crying?" And she said, "They took my master away. They killed Jesus and they took him away." And again, he said her name, Mary. And she looked up, she was crying, she looked up, and she saw it was Jesus. And he was alive. And she reached out to touch him, but he said, "No, don't touch me yet. I'm going to our Father, to God. And he is your Father too. Go and tell the others." And so she did. Mary ran off to tell all of Jesus' friends and all people, just like I'm telling you now, that Jesus did come back and he is alive. And he came to share God's love with everyone. To share God's love and God's joy forever and forever. And that's what we're doing now. And that's the story of Easter.
Thank you for that wonderful story. Great. So, again, welcome everyone and happy Easter. My name is Nayaswami Anandi. This is Nayaswami Bharat, and we're very, very happy to be here with you this morning. The reading this morning is from Rays of the One Light, which are weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita, written by Swami Ananda. And this is a special reading for Easter. Some chairs right there. Resurrection for every soul. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 20, we read the inspiring account of Jesus' resurrection. The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Then she runneth, and cometh to Simon Peter, and to the other disciple, whom Jesus loved, and saith unto them, They have taken away the Lord. Then, the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in their midst, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. The resurrection of Jesus, doubted by many, but affirmed by those who were close to him, was a miraculous event, though one not unique in history. For many great saints of other religions have appeared to their disciples after death. Sometimes their appearances have been, as that of Jesus was, in flesh and blood form, and not only in vision. Paramahansa Yogananda relates, in Autobiography of a Yogi, the account of his guru, Sri Yukteswar's resurrection after his earthly passing. Miracles of this type are revealed only rarely to the masses, but accounts of them, related by men and women of reputed truthfulness, have inspired many devotees with faith in the reality of subtler than material states of existence. Resurrection, Yogananda explained, means transformation, ultimately, from any lower state of being to a higher one. Worldly consciousness cannot imagine such transformation, except in terms, perhaps, of an improvement of the present mess of pottage with the addition of a new flavoring. Divine consciousness, however, is capable of taking the base metal of worldliness and transforming it into the spiritual gold of divine wisdom and love. In keeping with this truth, the Bhagavad Gita in the 9th chapter tells us, Ah, ye who into this ill world are come, fleeting and false, set your faith fast on me, fix heart and mind and thought on me, adore me, bring offerings to me, make me prostrations, make me your supremest joy, and undivided unto my rest, your spirits shall be guided. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
I'd like to read from Whispers from Eternity, and I'll read part of Master's poem on Come to Me, O Christ, as the divine shepherd of souls. Thy test on the cross prove the victory of divine wisdom over ignorance, of thy divine soul over flesh, of thy happiness over pain, and of thy love over hatred. So are we heartened to bear our crosses bravely and with faith. Teach us when we are crucified by harshness. I'm kind of at the point between needing reading glasses and not reading. Let me so we are heartened to bear our own crosses bravely and with faith. Teach us when we are crucified by harshness to pour out only sweetness, to bear with calmness the assaults of worry, and to give understanding unceasingly to those who unjustly hate us. O Shepherd of souls, wandering hearts are seeking of themselves the one fold of divine devotion. We have heard the ever call of music of thy infinite kindness. Our one desire is to find our home in thee, to receive the cosmic Father with the joyous open eyes of wisdom, and to know that all of us are sons of our own one God. Teach us to conquer the Satan, a dividing selfishness, which prevents the gathering of all our brother souls in the one fold of spirit, calling to one another by the watchword, love him who loves you, and love all who loves you not. Let us rally beneath the canopy of the universal oneness of the Christ. Amen. It's quite a soul-thrilling call on Yogananda's part in that poem. As children of spirit, we're made in the image of God. And just as God is untouched by his creation, he wants us too to be untouched by his creation. And that's really the whole point of this whole drama of delusion. We have to be separate from God. I haven't read where Master has said this, but it seems like so that we could have enough self-awareness to feel God's joy, because that's what actually God told Yogananda. Why did you make creation? I wanted to share my joy and my bliss. And it's something very, very important in the journey of the soul, who at first has a material consciousness, and then learns that they are spirit and reclaims their spiritual nature. The meaning of Easter is really the soul's victory over material consciousness. There are three principles that will help us to resurrect ourselves as Jesus did. The first one is to accept the divine will. And there's a humorous story, but a very insightful story, that a disciple of Yogananda, one of his monks, told. And he had just arrived at the Mount Washington Yogananda's ashram, and they were developing lake shrine property. And he just was new to everything, and immediately they went out and they started planting the palm trees up on the hillside. And it was no easy task. There was just maybe half an inch of soil, and they had to dig with their picks and dig a big hole, and they had to bring the dirt from below and bring water and fertilizer. And so they had worked all day, and they just had one more tree to plant. And it was the end of the day, and Yogananda was standing there below, and he said, plant the tree right here. And so they staked it, and they dug, and it took them a while to do it. And then he said, no, you planted it in the wrong place. You aren't listening to me. Over here. And so they put the soil back in. They couldn't take the water out. They had to bring more water. And they got the hole ready for the tree to be planted. They planted it there. And it was, oh, no, the wrong place again. What's the matter with you guys? And then again, it was the wrong place. And as they were digging, it was either the fourth or the fifth hole. And the monk had his pitchfork, and he was digging into the earth. And he looked, and Yogananda below had sighted himself, so that they say now, planet were in the line that I'm standing on. And so as he was digging, he saw the corner of his eye, Yogananda stand over to the left. And they said, "You guys aren't listening at all. What's wrong with you?" And by this time, all the older monks, and luckily this monk, they were laughing, and they knew that Yogananda was testing them. There was, unfortunately, one that was even newer, and he left the next day. But we, this monk, like all true devotees of the Guru, he just said, I had no self-ambition. I just wanted to learn from my Guru. And he just said that, the ego and the narrow sort of rationalizations that the ego makes are just huge obstacles on the path. And, it takes a lot of change. If you are to change ice into water, then it takes energy, doesn't it? Well, can you imagine the energy it takes? I'm sure that you can not only imagine, the energy it takes to go from matter consciousness to spiritual consciousness. Just think of the transformation that's required. It takes 5 million lifetimes. But when a soul wants God, they're very, very close, and especially when they have an inner path. There's a story of a saint he told of his grandmother. His grandmother was his guru, and she wanted to help him learn about attachment. And she said, "I want you to sit in this rocking chair. I want you to hold on and see if you can still remain sitting in the rocking chairs." And she came up, and she grabbed him, and he was only about 10 years old at the time. And she started pulling, and he held on firmly to the rocking chair, and he pulled, and then finally she pulled him out. He kind of hurt his arms a little bit. And then she said, "Now this time, I want you just to relax and come with me as I pull you." And so she reached down, and he just lifted himself up. And she said, "What was the difference?" "Well, the first time, grandmother, it hurt. Did it hurt the second time? No." And, Yogananda and the yogic teachings, they say that there's outward flowing energy, which is Satan keeping us in matter consciousness, and there's inward flowing energy. And if we ride that outward flowing energy, we're living in material consciousness. And if we hold on to that, and in the beginning, that's all we know, and so that's a natural tendency, is to hold on to things. And the rocking chair is pretty comfortable, and you're secure in the rocking chair. But if we go with that inward flowing energy without resistance, then that's when we can really make progress, and when we can leave the whole old world behind. That's what a pilgrim is. The definition of pilgrim is someone who leaves the old world and the old ways behind for a new world, a new discovery. And for the devotee, that's an eternal discovery. Yogananda said to overcome karma, we have to meet it even-mindedly and cheerfully. And just being neutral about what happens to us. And Swami Kriyananda also said that karma is a blessing, a divine love. Because, God, it hurts him when he sees that we're in limitation. And, but he has to have each soul learn this lesson. He can't come to a person and influence them and with his joy, and they can't really stand on their own 2 feet with it. If he recedes, it's not really their own victory yet. And so he allows us tests that really activate our energy and where we uplift it. And suffering is not pleasant. We suffer when we're in the ego. But if we aren't in the ego, we're free because we aren't identified with that. And so what will happen is that when we embrace our tests, then that's when we respond cheerfully, because that means that we've transcended the reality of that test to a certain degree. I had, a few years ago, just went through a period of extreme karma, one thing after another, and I wrote Nayaswami Jyotish. I said, well, I think I'm keeping my head above water during this time, and it felt like at least I had come to the surface a few times. And Jyotish very strongly said that you're getting rid of a lot of karma, and it's moving you that much quicker to, or closer to moksha. And that's really true when we don't resist and don't hold on. Is that it's true for the devotee, is that if we're just letting go of some aspect of material attachment from the past, or maybe something from the future, but it's that uncomfortableness of just of material realities and being caught by them that gives us the motivation to grow more. The second one is don't identify with the experience. Many years ago, maybe 30 years ago or so, I was having a little bit of problems with hurt feelings, and I would sort of carry this hurt with me. And I had a dream one evening that taught me a real good lesson about this. And in the dream, an Ananda community member, who's a very wonderful person, came up to me and shot me 8 times in the chest. And, I thought, And then in my dream, I was at a meeting with a bunch of community members, leaders in the community. And there were maybe about 18 people in the room. And they were discussing different aspects of the community. And you know how when you're on the edge of a conversation and you have something you want to share, you're kind of looking for an avenue, be able to share it? Well, the conversation kept moving on. And it went for a long time. I didn't get a chance to tell everybody about what had happened to me. I thought it was relevant information. It's something that I felt like the leaders should know about. But the conversation kept going. And then I heard a voice, and I think it was my right ear, and it said, "Bharat, let it go, it doesn't matter." And then it must have been transmitted an understanding that it doesn't matter, and let it go. And that's when I really started to see that the whole problem comes in when you're taking it too personally, that this is happening to me. I was reading Promise of Mortality, and the chapter on Easter that Swami Ananda wrote, and it's a magnificent chapter if you ever find yourself hitting the spiritual tests in your life. There's great advice there. But he was talking about how a master can feel pain. And they are, you think of a master and their consciousness. What does the Christ consciousness mean? That means being unified at the heart of all creation. And you just see yourself in oneness with all that. And that's your reality of life. And we think, well, that they're above that, but to demonstrate, to feel as the disciples feel, to teach a lesson, they can feel human pain just like we do. There's a story of Yogananda. He was at Mount Washington, and they were placing the wishing well. There weighed about 1,000 pounds, and the monks, unfortunately, it fell out of their hands and fell on Yogananda's foot. And there was an instant pain that Yogananda had. And then he turned to all the monks and said, "Let me show you something." And he said, "I'm going to put my mind right here." And then instantly that pain went away, and Yogananda was able to walk back and forth without any sign of that. And then he said, "Now I'm going to put my mind in the body." And then there was the pain that was there in the body. And they said, "Now I'm going to put my mind here." And then he was free of that. And this is an important lesson for all of us, is that if you, and I know we practice this because we practice it out of desperation, don't we? Sometimes. But we go to another place. We go to a higher place. And we focus on a higher reality. And if we keep calling on that reality, that will come. I was just, a few days ago, the body was unwell, and it was hard to meditate, and so I just had read this, and I just called in my meditation, and it was hard to, do certain parts of the meditation, but the other parts I could do, and I just kept calling and holding my mind up, and that was real, that was my reality, and I can't say a whole lot kicked in, but enough to keep me really absorbed for meditating for another 35, 40 minutes or so. And it's just always there. We just have to call on that. God is always with us. We have to just make the effort, don't we, to be with God. The story in the Bible about the good thief is very, very interesting as an example for us. As you know, when they were taking Jesus out to be crucified, people were jeering Christ and saying that if you're the Christ, save yourself. And the people would say he saved others, but he couldn't save himself. And all was coming from the crowd. And then Jesus was put on the cross in between the two thieves. And one thief was railing at Christ, saying that if you truly are the Christ, save us and save yourself. And then the other thief, who later became known as the good thief, and actually was made a saint by the Catholic Church in the 4th century, he said, "Leave him alone. This man has done nothing, and we're receiving our just reward for our bad acts." And then he said to Jesus, "Remember me when you reach the Father." And that's when Christ said that you will be one in my paradise. And what had happened with the good thief is that he forgot his own suffering, and he was expansive. And this is the trick of this not identifying. Just as a master doesn't identify personally with anything that happens to them, but what happens with most people during suffering is we become self-focused. And, this is happening to me, and it becomes our reality. But when we radiate outwards and don't identify with it, then our consciousness is larger. And we just, in a matter of scale, whatever is happening to us becomes smaller and smaller because we leave that reality behind. And this is really, it happens over and over again. Many examples in the community of people who have just didn't buy into the reality of the small suffering that was happening. Swami said that when he would be at the dentist and not taking Novocaine, he would compose music, and it was just a little thing that would just pass, and just to have that sense, so that we just get out of self-focus, maybe wanting pity from other people for what we're going through, or anything like that, but just to expand into a larger reality, to just be free of it. It's not pleasant, that reality, and it just makes sense to just step out of it. And that's where meeting things cheerfully and even-mindedly comes in. We aren't resisting our karma. When we resist our karma, then that karma takes a lot longer to play itself out. But if we sort of flow with it and our eye is higher than that karma, it just winds out, actually can wind out very quickly. Unless for some reason God wants the process to go a long time to just do a real thorough job of it. but more work will be done, and we'll be more and more free. And then see God as the only reality. God is the greatest magician, Yogananda said. He takes what looks unreal and he makes it look awful real. And that's Maya, that's delusion. And we sort of identify with that. But, Swami Shivananda used this example of a canvas painting. And he said that the tiger on the canvas painting, it can't bite you. The fire painted on the canvas painting can't burn you. And the knife on the canvas painting, it can't stab you. And that's material reality for the devotee whose reality is based in spirit. We aren't touched by a lower level of reality. There's we did a program in New England, and there was a gentleman there. It was an Ananda group, and he wasn't part of the group, as I think his wife was. But he said as a young boy, he was just 2 years old, and before he learned to speak, that he could just hear the sound of Om. And he didn't know the name for it, but he knew it was very thrilling to his being. And he was just comforted by that sound. And sometimes he would see his parents or people that visit him a little bit angry or upset or worrying about something. And he wanted to say, "Don't worry, Om is here. Just listen to it, and you don't have to worry," because he knew in his soul of just this constant presence of God. Patanjali said that Om is the most constant divine reality and most accessible of all the realities. And Om is the vibration of every atom in the universe. But at the Swami Kriyananda said that every atom, that vibration of that atom is centered by a still point. And that still point is the Christ consciousness reflected in every atom in creation. And so to get to the Christ, what you do is you tune into that vibration. At the roots of that vibration, is Om, the pristine vibration. And that leads us to the Christ consciousness. Well, so that vibration is always there for us. There's Sister Gautamanta, Yogananda's most advanced woman disciple. She had extreme health challenges for over 20 years. And Yogananda, he would often send her inner blessings, and she could feel when he was thinking of her, and even if he was far away. And one time, he was just in Los Angeles, and that's where she was, and he was giving a Sunday service talk, and then he came back and he went to her room, and Sister Gautamata was saying to Yogananda how much she enjoyed the different points that he made in his Sunday service talk. And she was like miles away, and this wasn't on the radio, it was on her inner radio. And Yogananda said, "You heard that, did you?" And so she was just always listening. And the problem is that this is why accepting the divine will is so important, is that if we have our own ambitions, our own little, likes and dislikes, and just self-involved, how can we hear and listen to God? We're too busy. I had maybe about 12 years ago, I was in Japan, and I was on the island of Hokkaido. That's the northernmost island. And it was really cold there. The ice freezes around the island in the dead of winter. I think this was November, late November. It's like Siberia weather. And there was an 8-year-old boy that was part of the group, and a blizzard came, and there's just really big snowflakes, and it just was pouring out of the sky. And there was already snow there, but you could walk on it. And I had the group write a reflective poem at the end of our nature wilderness exercises. And it was cold there. And so people wrote their poems pretty quickly. And then they made like a beeline back for the tent. But the little boy, he was very into his poem. And he kept writing, and it was just, and the snow started to build up, and it came over his knees and covered his lap. And it was just so inspiring to see him sit there in a sea of white with all the snow coming down. He was just still, and he was just absorbed in his poem. And then it came up to his waist and above his navel, and he was just still writing his poem. And then eventually I sort of asked him, "Are you finished now?" And because all the other groups were waiting for us. And no, he wanted to finish his poem. And then eventually he did, and then we went back. And I thought, that's very, very inspiring, because he was just so single-pointed. And anything that was going around, on the spiritual path, but just living on the material plane, there's going to be adversity that comes. And but to just be so centered and keeping your eye on your purpose, and this is what the devotee needs, is to just we're going for God. Renunciation is just dynamically, eagerly setting aside everything that doesn't help us get there, that keeps us separate from God, and keeping our eye on the goal. And then tests will move through us very quickly. We'll be able to see the divine reality behind those challenges. And the presence of God will be singing more and more, ever more deeply in our heart. And may the joy of Easter bring you eternal joy and happiness this spring and throughout the year. And that you remember the Christ consciousness within you, and may it touch your heart, and may your heart touch the heart of all creation. Bless you all.
The man that was Jesus had shown his pure form. Upon a high mountain he stood, transfigured, transfigured in light, that his chosen might see that he was the Christ.
Joy